Hello? Okay, just a couple of things before we begin. Remember to put your cell phones so that they don't ring, at least on vibrate and maybe off. Please avoid side conversations because it can disturb others as we're going through. There will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end, hopefully. And I will come around if you raise your hand and give you a microphone so that everybody can hear what your question is. Also, I will remind you at the end, but I'm supposed to do it now as well, to fill out the session evaluation on the app. So, without any more ado, here you go.
Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, right? You all said good morning, so you also don't know. So it's good. So I guess I've already made the introduction, which was I recognize a lot of folks in the room, which is great, and a lot of folks I don't know. So I was going to warn you from the beginning that I have a dry sense of humor, but you probably picked up on that already. So let me introduce to you the beautiful and talented Corliss Woodson. She's the Associate Vice President for HR at J. Sargeant Reynolds Community College, and she's here to make sure that the answers that I provide are truthful. Okay, so that's the whole key, right? So I'm the HR guy with the system office, and so our goal is to answer questions. And fearing that you might not ask questions, we've created 10 or 12 slides to kind of lead us through that process, but hopefully we'll be interactive. So let me start with a couple ideas to get us going. The clicker worked earlier in the test. Okay, all right. Well, so much for tests, right? So we have a technical difficulty. We hadn't started. So let me tell you what the slides say, right? Your HR department is changing. We're in this whole transformation process along with the VCCS and other functions where we're moving from kind of an old school administrative sort of approach to things to a new school business kind of partner arrangement. Essentially, shared services will do a lot of great things for the VCCS, and some of the things that are repeatable, the scientific, repeatable processes, things, the shared services center will do that. And then folks like me will have more time to do these kinds of things. So the high-touch activities of working with you and supporting you and your campus. That's really kind of the idea behind a lot of the stuff that we're up to, and hopefully you'll see much more of this kind of activity from us as we kind of go forward. We're not, also, Jim, we're not moving from here either, so I don't think it's the remote. I think it's something with the setup here. Thank you. So that's the first idea. The second idea is that today is about FAQs. As I said, we don't even have to go through any of the slides if you're asking questions and we're providing answers. So we gave you, these little sheets here, right? So this is what I was just talking about. We're moving our model for how we deliver HR services from an old school traditional view, a lot of paperwork and things like that, and moving to a kind of a new school sort of approach, and it's all about partnering with you and providing the high touch sort of activities. So today, we're going to talk about these kinds of things because we hear about those often, and from the preliminary questions we've seen so far, you're asking those kinds of questions. Now, the rules of the game, we're going to be interactive. We're going to take a written and verbal question. So if you have a question, please complete this. We'll pass them up, and we'll try to take as many as possible. For those that we don't get a chance to answer today, we'll follow through you via email and respond to your questions. Now, we can talk about some personal questions. So you can say, hey, I'm in my third year of a multi-year, and I'm looking to do that or whatever, and how does that work? We'd be more than happy to answer that. But we can't answer questions such as, my dean did this to me, and so what do you think, right? So just fair game on that one. So, and again, that's the name calling part. My institution does this. That's not the purpose of what we're here for, right? So we're here to try to, encourage us all to learn more about what I call the rules of the game. There are rules and policies and procedures of the Commonwealth, of the VCCS, and how we all work together. And it's almost impossible for us to know all that stuff. And that's why we're here and hopefully providing some service to you. I'm going to call on a lot of folks in the room who are co-conspirators to me in this enterprise. We've got a lot of HR managers in the room. I'm a little surprised by that, so I think they're here to make sure that I don't write checks that they can't cash. That's my assumption. So we're going to call on those folks in a minute. And we're going to try to cite the sources, what we're providing you, so that you can verify it and you can go back and look at different information. You have resources in your mind for what we might talk about during the conversation. And we might refer you to the appropriate person as well, to who's the expert on this subject we might offer. And then, as we say, we'll promise to follow up by email to make sure that every question that you might have is answered as a part of this process. So a lot of great questions, a lot of stuff's coming in, which is exactly what we want to do. So we'll start with a couple pop-ups. Who wants to ask the first question? Yes, sir.
So if you were to serve as an interim dean, for example, so
Yep.
professional faculty, by the time you are eligible for a multi-year contract after having served in that capacity, it's almost like a year must go by before you are allowed to then go ahead with the multi-year contract. Can you elaborate on that, the thinking behind that as far as the VCCS goes?
I'm not sure if I understand the question. So you're
Okay.
teaching faculty, you're going to be an interim dean for a while.
Correct.
And then during that period of time, you're interim dean, you're going to come up for a multi-year appointment, and you want to make sure that you're getting credit for that service, or it may impact that service?
The multi-year contract is not, you're not extended the multi-year when
Oh,
you're
yes.
serving in that capacity. And you are not eligible for the multi-year even after you leave that capacity for at least a year, I believe.
I'm not quite sure if that's accurate. That might be an interpretation of policy. I think administrators, we don't get multi-year appointments, right? I mean, you know, that's just the way, you know, we serve at the discretion of leadership. It's a different kind of role than it is for teaching faculty, and I think that's the complication. Now, the interim dean issue, it does change the dynamics of the work arrangement. But there's not a VCCS policy that says that that automatically gets excluded. Now, the question is, what percentage of your duties are administrative and teaching? So if you're doing 80% teaching and 20% administrative, I'm assuming we should treat you like a faculty member. If you're doing 80% administrative and 20% teaching, then that's a judgment call. And I think we have to talk about that. So, Corliss, I'm not aware of any policy at the system level that governs that. That's kind of a local decision, and I think you might want to negotiate that with the leadership at the beginning of that process.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Dr. Lee. There is the policy regarding acting pay, temporary pay, and you should negotiate those deals at the beginning. It doesn't change your permanent job assignment, and so whatever benefits are associated with your permanent job, they will continue for you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and there's a provision that if your duties are greater than 50%, right, of administrative work, you can only do that for 2 years before then a decision has to be made, right? And it has to get the Chancellor's authority beyond that, because the idea is to keep you, keep the, the rights, privileges, and benefits of that, teaching position intact. So there's a control mechanism for that, right? Mm-hmm. But negotiation is very important. So, my wife's a faculty member, at Hampton University. I've spent my career in higher ed, and always talking with my colleagues who are non-higher ed, and I always say that the most unique form of employment on the planet is teaching faculty, right? Because you get to negotiate the terms of your employment, right? Which is, everybody else is kind of like, here it is, take it or leave it, right? You know what I'm saying? It's just a different kind of arrangement. So a lot of things we were talking about today is probably going to be the interpretations of those unique parts of academia that we really don't see a lot of different places. And so some things we'll certainly say, there's some VCCS policies that are fairly clear, and then there's some local discretion. And that reflects your community, your leadership, your philosophy, and how you work, your curriculum, that sort of thing. So those matter as well. We're going to come to you second, ma'am. This gentleman here, he had his hand up last time. We'll go here, and then we'll come to you, okay?
Thank you. I have a question about sick leaves.
Yep.
I have accumulated about thousands of hours of sick leave. How can I use them?
Right.
And if the only way to use it is to get sick, how can I get sick?
Yes. Yes, that's a very good question. So I am knocking on wood with you. I'm rapidly accumulating gazillions. I've been blessed to only take 3 days of sick leave in my career, and I hope to never take any. But, leaves is really just what they call paid time off. So all organizations have some rules around time off and how they compensate. And then most attempt to balance their budget, like the Commonwealth, to say, certain kinds of leaves, if you don't use them, you lose them. So in my status as an administrator, every January they cut me back to a certain amount. It's just to manage the budget. Sick leave is slightly different. People don't usually take that away from you, but they do, it's, when you retire. Some organizations allow you to take that pot of resources and convert it into retirement. The Commonwealth, I think, did, distant past, and then they also attempted to balance their budget and say, you can get certain things under certain situations, you get credit for that, and then after that you don't. I think VSDP was designed to deal with that liability because legally, that's a liability against the institution's assets. So VSDP kind of did away with that. Those in traditional leave, I can't remember what the rules are about that.
They are allowed to accumulate as many hours as necessary since they haven't used them, but at the time of retirement, you're only going to be able to receive pay up to $5,000. And then you can usually cash that out or add that to your retirement or convert it into additional months of service, so that gives you a monthly benefit after retirement.
If you're under the traditional plan.
If you're in the traditional
Right.
plan.
So we have about 40 plus leave plans within the VCCS. So this is a good opportunity to sit down with your HR manager, look at your particular situation, because there's so many tree branches off that it'd be hard for us to tell you what's really applies to you as an individual from the platform, because it's, again, it's 40 something leave plans, because over time, the Commonwealth, as many organizations have changed their benefits, because again, it's resources at the end of the day about how they manage them, and they've created some grandfathering in certain situations and not in others. It's a little complicated. So yours is probably an individual question that we'll talk with you after which you let us know who you are, okay? But 5,000 is the limit on the sick leave if you're in a traditional plan, that's my memory, unless you're way grandfathered much earlier, there may be some unique things around it. Okay, so,
There's a
yes,
question
ma'am.
back here.
Oh, yeah, we had our hands back there. I'm out of order. See, obviously I'm not a teacher, right? Because I would kind of know what to do. Yeah, exactly.
I just need to, if you could clarify something you said with the first question. When you are doing something that is considered an interim position or a position that is a different position than you were in,
Yep.
you can do that for 2 years only.
Well, if it's greater than 50%
Yes,
time.
okay,
Yep.
okay. Where can I find that written?
Okay, it's in VCCS policy. We probably should have deputized one of our HR folks to have the policy manual open so we could say this number. But there is, so make sure you give us your name afterwards, and then we'll email that to you, right?
Okay.
As a matter of fact, the VCCS policy manual is the source of, 80% of the things we're going to talk about, and there's a link to it. It's a complicated link to get there.
Right.
But it's in there. Yep.
And
Yeah, section 3. Thank you, sir.
And let me also add that that category of that subject category that you're speaking of is called reassigned time or release time. I think we refer to it at our college as reassigned time, but in the policy is release time. And so yes, as a 9-month teaching faculty member, you are released from the teaching environment for any number of credits. But when it exceeds more than 50% of your workload, then you're not allowed to do that after the 2-year mark without getting some approval from the VCCS office. So let me say this about that, because some people want to know why we have policies on matters such as that. And it's an issue because it protects the employee. It's about protecting the employee. So it is actually unfair to you to work you as a 12-month administrator in a 9-month job. When it's time for you to retire, it's only going to consider your 9-month teaching faculty position, not your 12 months. So that's why it's limited for 2 years. So it's to your benefit to not do that more than 50% of the time. Or it says to our college leadership, hey, if you really need a full-time position, then you need to put that in the budget, create the position, advertise for it, and let's fill it with someone who's capable of doing that job. It might be the 9-month teaching faculty member, or it might be someone else. Okay?
thank you.
Absolutely. So we're going to go here first before we go to you, sir. I know we have another microphone somewhere. Okay,
Yeah,
let me
there's
take
2
that,
of them.
Corliss.
You can pass that one.
I was wondering about the status of the 3/4 professor time position for people over 50, I believe, and then you would still have full-time benefits. If that's passed, or what's going on with that?
Okay, okay, good question. So the question is about a 3/4 time faculty member and benefits. Let's see here. So this is a complicated chart. It's not designed for you to read the details of it, but I was going to talk about the categories of faculty as a general overview. And then, as you see on the left, left column, it talks about all the different kind of elements of a faculty member's life and how that's affected by that particular status. So the question here is, can you be a full-time regular faculty member, you know, and work less than a full load, right? The answer is yes, but it fundamentally affects your benefits and a few other things. And so that's what is called a part-time 9-month teaching faculty. So there's a person who's not full-time, right, and they're greater than 50% time. And they're, you know, if you were classified employees, it would be called a quasi full-time load, and it affects your benefits. So here's the key factors there. You're eligible for VRS, you're eligible for life insurance and all those things, but it's prorated. So if you're working 60% or 70%, it's prorated. But the big bugaboo is partial benefits, and it's health care. You are eligible for health care coverage, but you do not get the state's kind of employer costs. So if you have a family, as an example, and you have health care coverage for a full family, the total cost is around $17,000, $18,000, $19,000. As an individual, you may pay $3,000. The Commonwealth carries the other. You would have to cover that if you were in that particular status. Now, some folks, it may be okay because they may have coverage with their spouse and it's a little more tenable, but for many people, that would not be. That's the biggest barrier that, generally speaking, is associated with that, right? So, but the position is available, and your leadership would have to agree to that, and it makes sense given, you know, the needs of students, right? It may be a situation if you're in the Southwest and you're a Spanish teacher or whatever the case may be, they may not be a volume for 10 courses a year, but maybe there's a solid volume for 6, and that could be an opportunity for that kind of position. So it's on the menu of options, and I think it is driven by, you know, the curriculum and the needs of your particular community.
And Chris, I might also add, it's not restricted in terms of age. So that decision can be made at any point in time, you know, from an annual basis when your academic deans are developing the workload. So I know for Reynolds, we probably used it more so with foreign languages, as Dr. Lee indicated, with Spanish. So we had a French teacher who consistently was at 60% in terms of her workload, but that's all that was needed to be taught at Reynolds was the 60% range of classes. Okay.
So when you mentioned the health benefit, was that just the effect of a family plan, but an individual
Or
plan?
individual plan is the same thing as well. You're eligible for the benefit, but you don't get the state subsidy. So individual, I think the total cost for an individual is about $5,000, and you might pay like, you know, $1,500. So if you're an individual, then you would have to cover that $3,500 difference, or you don't have coverage otherwise. Right? So it's a proration of all benefits and eligibility for health care. Right? I think it's a gentleman in the back. So he was next, and then we'll go to you, ma'am, and then you there, and you there. All right, so 1, 2, 3, if you help me on track. There's a gentleman in the back corner.
Yeah, I just had a question. The rumor mill has been going around with a bunch of faculty, and we are trying to make assumptions, and I just want to get a clarification. There was a faculty member who left working for us and went to another community college. That community college had a layoff, and then they were let go at that community college. They had been working with us for over 15 years, but at the new college, they were last in, and they were the last in, so became the first out. Is that how it works? Is that not
that
true,
one would be a personnel question, and there's a lot of things that would impact that. So I wouldn't want to try to deal with that one from here. But there's a policy called reduction in force that governs those protocols. So it'll provide us with an answer, but I don't want to address that particular answer here because I think it'll be inappropriate to have an opinion on it without the facts. Is that fair? So I think it's policy 3.12 is in the policy manual. It has the protocols that are supposed to be followed there. Right? Yes, ma'am.
How do you distinguish the work hours per week for 9-month teaching faculty versus the credit hours?
Great. We have an answer for that one, actually. We have an answer. I don't know if it's a good answer, so maybe take it back. Okay. So, one of my jokes, having, worked at 4 different institutions and spent 22 years as an HR manager in higher ed, is what sometimes I joke, when you tell me what faculty work is, we'll write a policy to govern that, right? Because you and I both know it's very, very complicated what work is. But we were forced into coming up with an approximation of what work is because of the Affordable Care Act. So the Affordable Care Act came along and said if you work over 30 or more hours for any employer of a certain size in the country, you're required to have health care. As we just talked about, it's $17,000. So imagine, you work at an organization, and then now we're forced to provide a benefit for everybody. For us, we have 10,000 adjuncts, well, about 9,000 adjuncts within the VCCS. That became a real big issue for us and every college and university in the country. So we came up with an approximation that's based upon an IRS rule around teaching loads. That standard comes from the American Association of Community Colleges. A lot of organizations in the country chimed in, wrote briefs for the Internal Revenue Service, et cetera, and then they came back and said, we think this is it, right? And we've kind of adopted that standard. I don't remember what that math is, but we do have a FAQ on that, and it details that. And our interpretation for the VCCS is roughly that 12 credit hours in a semester, right, is around 29 hours, right? Yes. And then there's a mathematical formula that follows that. And that's why we restrict adjuncts to being 12 hours or less, because otherwise they would follow that threshold, and we can't have 2,000 people becoming eligible for health care with a price tag of $17,000 per, right? So we have that mathematical formula. And that mathematical formula is also used to then say if you are an adjunct and you teach 2 courses and you got a wage job, right, of 6 hours, how that goes out. So we were forced into doing that, and it creates some clarity. Is it perfect? No, but it's based upon a standard the IRS endorses that actually came from ACC's, sort of research. So we'll, again, make sure you give me your email. We'll send that to you. But it's in a whole package of information that describes the benefits and how we come to it with the VCCS. So I think number 2 is the lady in the back. You're number 3? Okay, we're number 2 here? Okay. Thank you.
Can you address summer pay for full-time faculty and why colleges use different limits on the credits?
Yep. That one's easy. VCCS policies allows local interpretation, and it's the interpretation of the leadership, how they want to manage that particular issue. It is not a requirement, it's a discretion. So we do know there's variability. Charlie Erico, I saw him out in the hall before we started. He's a chair of CFACT. I think he's pulled together some kind of analysis of that, and I think we do it about 9 or 10 different ways across the VCCS. No good, no bad of it. It's a local decision. Some of it's driven by local curriculum. I'm told, like on the Eastern Shore, not many folks there want to work during the summer. In other places, a lot of folks want to work. Driven by student issues, by budgets, and all kinds of other variables. And I think the Chancellor has kind of chimed in on this once before, indicating that he didn't desire to change the policy, right? It's a local sort of discretion.
So faculty have no input on that?
I think you have input. I think you have to work with your dean and your vice president and start that conversation of what that means,
I would also say, Dr. Lee, you can work through your faculty senate, depending upon how active they are at your organization, at your college. I can also share with you a best practice at Reynolds, because we received a lot of feedback from our faculty, and we listened to them on that subject. And so if there was going to be a change in summer compensation, it's only fair that faculty get that information at a time in which they can make a decision as to whether or not they want to work at Reynolds or work somewhere else. Okay, so I'm an HR director. I don't care where you work, as long as you want to work somewhere, okay? And so we made a commitment at Reynolds that we were going to publish our summer compensation plan by February 1 of each year. And that way, our faculty can make the decision. If they want to work at Reynolds, they will know what their pay is going to be based on the number of courses and credits that they talk about with their dean. And then they can decide, you know, if they're going to get a summer contract. But at least it's clear to everyone. And so we publish that information. We actually have a summer pay policy, and we have an addendum to that policy. So we don't actually have to change the policy, but we change the addendum. And so as part of our planning process, and we look at enrollments and funding and budgets and all of that, then we make a decision by February 1. We change the addendum, we put the date on it, we publish it, and then I send out an email to our faculty, and I let them know that this is what it is, and that way they can make their decision before they engage in the summer. Is that fair? We think it's fair.
Okay. I think
good
Karen
pra-
had
and
a
a good
comment on that
practice.
also, right?
Well, I was going to say our faculty committee reviews the summer pay and sends it out, and then faculty will advise. We cannot make a decision. We can advise the vice president and president as to what we think is fair pay.
Exactly.
That's good.
My question has to do with workload calculation for faculty who have large hours of lab compared to a straight lecture faculty person. Because what's happening is lab people are working way more than your straight lecture people, and we're not getting credited for the amount of time equitably, nor is it done the same from college to college to college. And that's raised a lot of concern for us. I mean, right now, trying to get to I'm still not at a full workload. I am working either student hours or lecturing or lab 40 hours a week. And then if I did straight lecture, I would only be doing 25 hours a week if I was at 12 hours. And I'm still not at 12 hours.
Right. So this is one of the most complicated conundrums we have. And so what we have to do is get our academic officers, our deans, council of deans, and ASAC, you know, the vice presidents, to look at that issue and come up with something that makes sense. Let me tell you where we are now, right, and how some of that is being addressed. So everybody's intimately familiar with the VCCS 29, and if you could figure it out, please let me know, right? But, you know,
Well, that's the issue. It can be interpreted so many ways.
It is. So it's a simple and beautifully elegant, you know, system designed to try to create a fair playing ground on things that are fundamentally not fair. So how do you create a policy that deals with automotive and the kind of labs that they do, fine arts that is mostly in the lab, you know, lecture, sciences, and a whole plethora of other disciplines. So it attempts to create some sort of even platform, and that's a challenge. And the 2-to-1 in policy that credit hours in the lab, I mean, lab hours are 2-to-1 to credit hours, has been a long-standing one. It works in some situations. I'm told it doesn't work. But no one has been able to come up with some other way of getting there. And periodically, I know ASAC has talked about this, but we haven't figured that out. I don't know how to get to a better standard other than the academic community coming together to have that conversation about what is work and how that looks. Clinicals, I know that's one of the questions here, is even more complicated because folks in nursing and the other allied healths have talked about this issue across a range of variables such as, yeah, you know, you're in a clinical situation, sometimes you're hands-on and the person's in front of you, and sometimes you're just there as the adult supervision in case something goes wrong. And so then how do you...
I've never just been there.
Oh, no, I'm just...
I've been hands-on
I know, but I'm
for
saying
9 to 12 hours a day, but don't get credit for it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not doubting it, but I'm saying here's
Right.
some interpretations of that, right? So it's the same thing. So the point is that how do we define what is work and how is that is calculated and then create a standard where that is fair against others? That's not my area of expertise. That's an academic issue to help come up with that core unit of measure. And then we create units of measure across discipline. That, I think, is still and has been perennially an open question on how to address that. So let me tell you two things that are that's underway with that. We have a policy going before ACOP next week. It's an update to policy 3.5, which is about workload And what it does, incredibly, is to define several key terms, because we have several policies related to things, and how those the definitions, or the intended definitions of those terms has always been up to interpretation. So now we've agreed on definitions. So policy really doesn't change. We just put definitions at the beginning of the policy that helps to govern things. So I think that's a step forward. At the same time, ASAC and COD is working on all those other policies that intersect those definitions, and that's happening this academic year in Fort. And they've also charged us with creating a task force to deal with the issue of clinicals, specifically. We started that a couple years ago when we did the faculty employment spectrum that produced a 3/4 time position and a few other things, and we kind of lost some traction as we moved away from re-engineering. But that's an open issue that we're now about to address more deeply, because you're absolutely right. It seems to be out of whack. Now let me add one more point just as this commentary on the clinical part. My experience from watching what happens across campuses is that our current policies do not effectively serve the needs of the allied health community.
Correct.
Because it appears to be difference. So what has happened is campuses have done things inconsistent with policy, largely to achieve an economic end, meaning the marketplace requires a certain amount of compensation for someone to come to work for us, and so then we start creating all kinds of stuff that really doesn't exist, because we got to get to that number, otherwise we don't have anyone to work for us. So I think we probably need to have something that is completely different for that particular community, because our policies really didn't anticipate that kind of profession. That's just my commentary. We'll see what our leadership, academic leadership, comes forward with and produces, but we're about to address that systematically as an organization, to come up with policies to talk about clinicals and the whole allied health world together. And I'm hopeful that we'll come up with something that makes sense, to allow you to recruit and retain part-time and full-time faculty to support clinicals. I know it's a long answer, but I was hoping not to talk about clinicals. And then Karen was the first person who gave me a question at the beginning, and I said, okay, well, we got to talk about clinicals. But it is actually up there, and it's something very important. We know it's very important, and but fortunately, we're about to look at it as a group, and sounds like you want to volunteer for that, right?
I would love to be on that committee. I have a couple other cohorts probably would want to be on it. But the other
I'm told
part
that
is
nursing faculty, come together in packs, right? They don't travel alone.
Yes, we do.
Okay. Hey, Marines do that too, so I agree with that idea.
I could tell by the smiles in the room that there are a lot of nursing faculty.
Yeah. Well, and then, so what you're basically saying is you're going to address it, but there's no definitive timeline on when this issue could be resolved?
Well, ASAC, made that charge, earlier in March when it was their last meeting.
Okay.
So we're just getting through that governance process right now. And so I'm assuming we'll have it established this spring, and hopefully they'll start voting on it in the fall, the normal cycle that you go through that governance process.
Okay.
Chris, I have a question here. It seems to resonate in many of the documents I have in front of me, but it seems like everyone wants an answer to a question about retirement, and how, what are the rules, where do I stand? I want to encourage each of you to go out to the Virginia Retirement website and sign up for My VRS. The Virginia Retirement System has done an overhaul of their website and the profiles that they provide to each of us, and that includes myself. I go out there periodically to see if I'm still alive, okay? See if my years are adding up correctly, because I don't want to wait until my retirement date and I sit down with a counselor to find out that they've calculated something differently from what I have been calculating for years. So each one of us should go, if you've already done this like a year or two ago, I'm saying to you, you still need to do it again, because this new overhaul that has been done by the Virginia Retirement System will give you updated information at a glance on your first screen. So it will tell you exactly where you are. It's the virginiaretirementsystem.org, and then it says if you're a first-time user and you've not set up a profile, you'll set up a profile with My VRS. You may even have to call the VRS to get step-by-step instructions on how to do it. Your HR team at your local colleges will not be able to assist you with that. You actually have to talk to the VRS and establish your own profile there. It's a wealth of information, and it'll explain a lot of information. In order to be vested with the Virginia retirement system, you have to complete 5 years of full-time service here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so that can be at any state agency. There are 135 state agencies, and our community colleges are 23 of the 135 state agencies. And so they will combine all of your service and look at it in that way. They'll also explain the difference I saw on here between the 457, which is the deferred compensation program. What's the difference between a 457 and a 403B? That is additional retirement programs that you can sign up for, and then the cash match. You have to at least put up some money, $40 per pay period, and they will at least match that money. That is free money.
That's free money.
If you're not participating in cash match, you are leaving money on the dresser for somebody else to take one day. Okay, so everyone, if you're working full-time, you should be able to at least put up $40 out of your paycheck. I remember trying it with $10 when I first started with state government, and I saw that it only decreased my paycheck like by $6. I said, oh, but I'm saving 10. So I increased it to 20. Then I increased it to 40. And so you can make those incremental steps, but you need to make that first step and not leave that free money on the table. So I wanted to answer those questions about retirement because I saw that multiple folks had submitted questions there.
If you're in the ORP, do you still need to go through that VRS?
Yes, you should. I'm in ORP along with you.
Yes.
So while you don't, have that same retirement plan, you still have access to the cash match. And then there's also access to the 457 with VRS. So the 457, 403B, 401K, you've heard that from the private sector. Those are 3 separate laws related to what you could save on your own. The 457 just happens to be managed by VRS, right? So you can save, we have, because of the unique arrangement that a 401K is for private sector, 403B is for nonprofits, and 457 is for governments, but we're both a nonprofit and government, so you actually have the option of saving for retirement on your own up to $18,000. If you're over 50, it's 24. So I just revealed my age, right? So you can save $18,000 a year of your own money toward retirement. You might want to do that as you get closer, or even now start it, depending on your life situation, in both the 403B and the 457, right? Which is pretty good, but good if you're planning for retirement. And then there's a few other unique things about it. They're similar, but they're kind of different. For example, if you left employment at age 55, you can get access to a 457. For 403B, it's 59 and a half. So they're similar, just like with a 401K, but they're different. There's some rules around it. You may want to kind of pay attention to those, talk to your HR manager about that, but they're different retirement plans. It's your own money, helps accumulate, and as Corliss said, these are pre-tax, arrangements, So the cool thing about it is if you save $100, depending on your tax bracket, let's say you're in a 25% tax bracket, it only takes $750 out of your pay. And that money goes into your retirement account. It accumulates at a higher rate over your career. And when you pull the money out, then it's taxed. The good thing is, hopefully you're retired then and you're in a different tax bracket, so you pay less for taxes. So, knowing some of those things kind of help you out. But there's a whole plethora of retirement kind of variables, as you see here. And everyone's situation is slightly different, and some advantages and disadvantages about it. But I would go out to the site. They tell you about the 457 with them, the cash match program, and a few other variables. Okay? So we have lots of hands. I've lost track, but I saw this gentleman earlier, so we're going to go him.
And we need to wrap up,
and
Dr.
then we're
Lee,
going
5
to go
more
to
minutes.
the lady there, and then we'll come back this way. So go ahead, sir.
Just a quick follow-up to what you just said. I'm thrilled to hear about the MyVRS website improvements, but if we still have a question, is there an actual breathing human being?
Absolutely. You can call the Virginia retirement system at any point in time. In fact, they encourage you 10 years before you even think about retirement to contact them. They have counselors available Monday through Friday, the regular work week. So you can call and talk to a VRS counselor at any point in time. Because if you don't have the expertise at your college or your state agency, that's okay. VRS is there to support all of the state employees.
Right.
Yes, it is.
Right. And before I forget about it, we have about 5 or 6 HR people in the audience I want to ask them to hang out afterwards, you know, so everyone else leaves. So if my colleagues would hang out, I would appreciate it. So, yes, ma'am.
Just clarification, you said to be vested, you had to have 5 years of full-time service. How about if you had worked for many years adjunct, you were granted X number of years when you went full-time? Do you still have to have full-time years?
Yes, the Virginia retirement says 5 years of full-time service to the Commonwealth of Virginia. Part-time experience, adjunct experience, you can purchase that in a prior service agreement, but that has to go through the Virginia retirement system and can be added possibly, but that's a conversation you have to have with the Virginia retirement system. And so I would also encourage you to contact them and talk about prior service and the purchase of part-time service in that prior service umbrella, okay?
Okay, lady right here in the teal, is that teal?
Yes, there's a lady in the teal, right here on this 1, 2, 3, third row.
You receive release time for any director or administrative responsibilities as a 9-month faculty member. Are there additional required office hours above the 10 that's required for being a faculty member? And what are they?
There's nothing in policy that governs that. I think that's part of the negotiation with your dean.
Up front, yes. We had a faculty member, for example, an assistant dean actually went out on a medical leave. And so the 9-month teaching faculty member was still going to teach, but she taught only 6 credits. And then the other, what's 6 and 8, what's 15 and 6 and 8? You know, whatever that is left, 9. Okay.
What's the question again?
I'm HR, I'm not math, but 9 credits. So she was given 9 credits, but here's the expectation listed out, you know, by the dean. Here are how many hours I'm going to work in the office. Here's what I'm going to do, you know, and then here's what I'm going to continue to do office hours. You lay out all of those things up front. You negotiate all of that up front so there's no issue, and then no issue of compensation. You know what you're going to get up front, okay?
Yep.
So you negotiate that.
Okay, Michael had his hand up like several times. You're
Yep.
too close to me, I can't see you. That was a joke, okay.
Hopefully I'm in the right room asking the right question. If I'm a full-time non-exempt and I'm out on short-term leave, short-term disability, and decide to log on to my email from home, is this considered work and will it affect my benefits?
That's a very good question.
Yes.
I don't think we have laws today that governs the whole mobile electronic world. And I think it depends on what they're doing, for what purpose, and a few other variables. So I couldn't answer that. So like workers' comp, maybe this. For employment purposes, maybe that. For that purpose, it really depends on the whole fabric, but no one knows today, and it'll be that situation.
And Chris, I'd like to add, the federal government, the Department of Labor manages wage and hour. So you mentioned a full-time, non-exempt classified employee. And so they use the term on their website and in their rules and regulations called de minimis. And it's a Latin term meaning that it's too insignificant to count. And so we do not have to pay employees for every little thing that, you know, you do in the workplace. And so but at the same time, if the work is significant, it should be counted. So when you go out on the on your computer and you're logging in and you're just entering your time, you know, that's going to be counted as de minimis. You know, too insignificant to count. If you're going out there on the website and as a result you see an email and you take the time to answer it and it has to be researched and it takes you 10 to 15 minutes to do that, that should be time that should be included on your timesheet.
If you were told to go out
Okay?
there by your supervisor to do it, I mean, too many variables there.
It's
with
a
the
lot
type
of
individual.
variables there, but again, you know, you want to keep it to a minimum in terms of any interaction you have on the computer just to enter a transaction.
Let me make a couple final
Okay.
remarks,
Yes.
and then we'll kind of close up. This stuff is complicated, right? You know, and that's why you have these highly intelligent, very capable people called HR managers. You know, we do this for a living. It's our honor to serve you, right? So part of what we're going to do when we finish here is, you know, if you have questions you didn't get answered, write those down. We're going to make sure that you get an answer to your question. And if you're trying to negotiate the workplace alone, you're doing it wrong. you know, ask for help. We only exist to support you. So give us work to do, give us a challenge. It's our honor and privilege to serve you. So please ask questions, ask early and often. We have to consult one another because there's a lot of stuff out there, right? And so please let us do that for you. Now, send those for it. We'll make sure you get an answer to your question. Ms. Woodson, final comments from you because I think we're out of time.
I would just say be educated about your employment and do take the time to ask the questions and give your HR team an opportunity to get back to you. We do not have this stuff memorized. It is very complicated information, but we do know how to research it. We share among each other. We ask questions among ourselves, and we'll get you the right answer. But please stay educated about your employment options and your processes and your benefits, and know that we will attempt in every way to get you the right answer. Okay? Well, you know, the laws are the federal law, the state law, the Virginia Community College system, and then your local college. It's a lot, okay? So that's why we don't like to give you instantaneous answers, but we will take your questions, we will research them thoroughly, and get you the best answer possible.
All right,
Thank you.
Yeah.